My name is Eric Straczynski, and you're listening to episode number 008 of Gut Reactions. Hey guys, welcome to episode number 008 of Gut Reactions. As usually happens when I'm preparing these shows, something will happen in the world of horror, or I'll see something that kind of triggers a last-minute topic change for an episode. So I'm sure most of you saw, especially if you follow my page, that Ermey passed away Sunday, April 15th. Obviously known for his role as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in my favorite film of all time, Full Metal Jacket.
I am Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, your senior drill instructor. From now on, you will speak only when spoken to. And the first and last words out of your filthy sewers will be, sir. Do you maggots understand that? Sir, yes, sir.
And Toy Story playing the voice of Sarge.
It has been an honor serving with you. Good luck, folks.
But the thing that introduced me to him was actually Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning.
I was hungry and he gave me meat. I was thirsty and he gave me drink. I was a stranger and he took me in. This family has endured through adversity and pain. We have endured. We have prevailed. We will never, ever go hungry again. Amen.
Those two movies were pretty formative for me as a horror fan, and I'll get into that later. But I really want to take this episode to talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre and its sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, and primarily focusing, of course, on R. Lee Ermey's contribution to those films. But I really just felt like that's what this episode needed to be about, was just about his impact in the horror space. So anyway, before we get into that topic, I want to quickly talk about what I've been watching this week. First off, I watched Friday the 13th, Part 6.
They thought the nightmare was dead and buried. They were wrong. Jason lives. Happy Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives. Rated R.
Starts Friday, August 1st at a theater near you.
If you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or any of the podcast hosts, you probably saw a bonus episode pop up with a audio commentary for Friday the 13th, Part 6. I was not prepared for that commentary, and frankly, I think it shows. It wasn't my strongest moment, but it was fun. It was fun to watch it. Really hard to watch a Friday the 13th movie and talk over it because there's so much happening and so much fun to be had just enjoying the movie that trying to fill it in with information or just with commentary notes is kind of difficult, but really enjoyed it. It used to be my favorite of the series, tied with 3, but now it's probably bumped down to 3rd or 4th place in the series for me. Part 7 takes the first place in that kind of grouping. I just think that movie's beautiful. And then probably after that is Part 3, and then Part 6 somewhere under there. Yeah, really, really fun. Really interesting to see kids actually at Crystal Lake. It's kind of like Jurassic Park. Seeing the park in action is kind of interesting, and the way that changes everything. So it was a good viewing experience, and it was fun seeing kind of self-aware horror pre-Scream. I've become kind of addicted to those types of things and discoveries. The next thing I watched was the absolutely dreadful Truth or Dare, which is the new Blumhouse movie that came out just last weekend.
Something really weird has been going on ever since Mexico.
Oh, come on.
I'm serious. I'm seeing things.
Truth or dare?
Dare.
I know it sounds insane.
Just a little.
This fine young lady here dared me to show you my business.
Seen it before, not impressed.
Carter said, tell the truth or you die. Do the dare or you die.
Refuse to play.
You know what? Screw this.
And you die.
We're not playing the game. It's playing us.
I really don't know where to begin with Truth or Dare. I expected it to be bad in a fun way. I'm just gonna say it. It's not a good movie. It's garbage. It's poor filmmaking, which I was kind of sad because of the director, Jeff Wadlow. And if you're not familiar with him, he had directed a movie, back in 2001 to 2005, and it was called Cry Wolf.
We're sneaking out. Do you want to come?
Where are we going? Westlake tradition. To do what?
To play the game.
So how do we play?
It's a lying game. The object? Avoid suspicion. Manipulate your friends. Eliminate your enemies. This year, we've got to raise the stakes. Let's convince them murderers on campus. They're the sheep, and we're the wolves.
Essentially, it was a slasher, but really interesting take on it. And it was a movie that I watched over and over and over again. I really enjoyed the movie. And so I was interested to see him tackle something. I hadn't seen anything of his in, 13 years. So I wanted to see him, coming back with this Truth or Dare movie and see if he could inject some of that style and kind of some of that style into it. And man, it was terrible. Aside from the filmmaking aspects with, some of the, clunky CGI and some poor acting from about 95% of the cast, it's paired with a really negative and kind of narcissistic worldview. Now, look, I'm not the person that's typically going to blow the whistle on, something being morally irresponsible or something like that. Obviously, I enjoy, a lot of different horror movies and movies of every sort that I might disagree with its worldview, but it's a well-structured or well-stated movie or worldview. But in this movie, everything's just treated, whether it's misogyny or alcoholism or rape, sex addiction, suicide, it's all treated with varying levels of carelessness. And I can deal with characters being, bad people. But the film clearly endorses a lot of the questionable or obviously immoral decisions that the characters make by underlying it with, kind of this emotional or approving type of music. And the fact that the movie affirms some of the decisions made, again, I don't want to spoil anything, but the fact that it affirms especially some of the decisions that our main protagonist makes was really kind of unsettling and upsetting for me. And it really made me not care about any of the characters or how they were going to end up. Again, from a filming level, aside from a few moments here and there that I thought were generally good, the overall thrust of the movie, I just couldn't get behind. It really seemed to put its effort toward being boring and poorly paced. Aside from the opening, which I thought was really good and I thought promised a good movie to come. Unfortunately, that movie never did come. We just ended up with this very bland and, silly movie. It's odd for me, but I wish Blumhouse would keep working on movies like Get Out and The Purge. They're very well crafted and they're socially important, but I just hope they don't put out more stuff like this. It's a movie that transcends being just bad and is just downright irresponsible as a movie, both in its worldview and its craft. And, I'm not one to say that. I'm not one to point out, the worldview in this is so horrible, don't go see this. But, and again, I wouldn't tell you not to go see this necessarily, but the way it deals with these topics is pretty shocking. And I was kind of disappointed with it. But anyway, that's enough about that. In addition to watching the terrible Truth or Dare, I also watched Tobe Hooper's miniseries Salem's Lot.
Ben Mears has been away too long. And now at last, he's come home.
My men fought at Valley Forge.
Daddy, come back safe.
Home to the childhood memories, to the old familiar faces, to a life unmolested by time.
And with your saints, let him rejoice in your presence forever. We ask it through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Home to Salem's
Well,
Lot.
and I believe the last episode of the podcast, I talked about the 2004 version of Salem's Lot and really how much I enjoyed that. It jumped up my list quite a bit. I thought Rob Lowe was quite good in it. I thought Rutger Hauer was great in it. Donald Sutherland's probably my favorite role of his. I'm not really generally a big fan of Donald Sutherland. I really enjoyed it. Tobe Hooper's, I was very excited to jump into, since obviously I'm a fan of the director from, 1970s Texas Chainsaw and Texas Chainsaw 2, from Poltergeist. I'm a big fan of his work, and so I was excited to see his take on Salem's Lot. There's a lot of genuinely good, scary moments. A lot of moments where when my wife looked up, she was like, "What is this? Why are you watching this? Please turn this off." But there's also a lot of kind of unnecessary and monotonous kind of TV movie filler. And so, unfortunately, while the horror elements worked, the love story didn't really work for me. There was just a lot of boring conversation that kind of filled the scenes. And, of course, the horror scenes were good enough to kind of carry you through it. But there's no reason this should have been a 4-hour movie. I really wish it would have just been a good hour and 20-minute movie. And I think being a tighter movie like that, I think it would have been one of Tobe Hooper's great movies. I think, the movie's at fault for just being too long, and being made for a TV format for the story just doesn't really work the same way The Shining did. So it's worth checking out for Stephen King fans and fans of Tobe Hooper. I'm happy I saw it. I'm glad I have some reference points to some of the more famous or infamous scenes. But overall, it's not one I'll probably revisit very often. I'll probably go to the 2004 version more often than not. But yeah, it's worth checking out. The last movie I was able to watch, I actually introduced my wife to it. I'd seen it several times before, but I rewatched Tim Burton's Ed Wood.
From Touchstone Pictures, he brought you Batman and Beetlejuice. Now, from the mind of Tim Burton comes an incredible journey into a magical world, Hollywood.
Action!
This is the true story.
You want to keep moving. You've got to get through that door. Ah, that was perfect.
Of an unforgettable filmmaker.
Stop playing!
That was a nightmare.
Worst film you ever saw. Well, my next one will be better.
Johnny Depp is Ed Wood.
Hello.
Rated R. Midnight sneak preview this Saturday in select cities.
So obviously, Ed Wood is a biopic of Ed Wood, directed by Tim Burton. Ed Wood was the director who made Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is considered one of the worst movies ever made. And I can honestly say I've sat through the movie and can attest that it is indeed horrible. What's amazing about that, I think it was Elric Kane on Shockwaves, but he talks about how what's so amazing about that movie is it's about the worst filmmaker that's ever lived, and yet the first thing you want to do at the end of that movie is make a movie. And so what I think Tim Burton did, and what I think only Tim Burton could do, is show this outsider who believed with all his heart he was the next Orson Welles or Alfred Hitchcock. He believed with all his heart that he was going to be the next big name. The fact that Tim Burton's able to play that and, poke fun on the things that are obviously funny and laugh about things that are obviously funny, but yet he has this reverence for this outsider that is doing everything he can to pursue his dreams and his desires. It's a really beautiful movie, and one where, I almost want to tear up every time, certain scenes take place with him and Bela Lugosi, or when he fails, you really feel that failure. When he succeeds, you're right there with him. And it's just a beautiful movie, and it's for that reason that's this week's bloody good movie. If you haven't seen Ed Wood, and maybe you're tired, like I am in a lot of ways, of the Johnny Depp, Tim Burton movies with not a lot of substance and all style, I think you need to give this movie a shot. It's a genuinely beautiful movie and much deserving of your time. Well, anyway, that wraps up what I've been watching. So I want to go ahead and get into our topic, talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 2003 and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The New Beginning, starring R. Lee Ermey.
The film which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a group of 5 youths. It is all the more tragic in that they were young. But had they lived very, very long lives, they could not have expected, nor would they have wished to see, as much of the mad and macabre as they were to see that day. For them, an idyllic summer afternoon became a nightmare.
So my history with Texas Chainsaw Massacre is kind of interesting. It's the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie that I saw of this series. I saw it before, and many times actually before watching Tobe Hooper's original classic. And I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning before that as well, and maybe even more times than Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The reason I returned to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre well over and over and over again was because Arlie Ermey's performance is absolutely incredible. So Texas Chainsaw Massacre was kind of one of my many gateway drugs. I always talk about, first introductions to horror on the show. It was one of my first real introductions to the bloody, gory slasher movie, and, the scares and the suspense and the style of these movies. It was something that these movies especially had this energy to them that was just fascinating. They were scary, they were gross, they weren't the mainstream horror movie you expect to see in a theater, but it had this really raw nature to it that was just really fascinating. So watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it was a really great viewing experience. It was one of my favorite horror movies for a long time. It still is. It's way up there on my list. And Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, same thing. I really hold that movie in high esteem and really enjoy that as well. And a fun story, just another personal connection. My wife and I watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre together, and she was freaked out the whole time. And I remember midway through the movie, we were watching on a laptop, but the power went out. And so the movie's still going on the laptop, but every light in the house just shut off. And I just remember her being like, oh no. And so that's just kind of an interesting personal connection to it. But anyway, it's been a series. The Texas Chainsaw series as a whole has been one that has grown on me over time. I'm a huge fan of, obviously, the remakes of Tobe Hooper's original and the sequel. I'm lukewarm on 3. I really appreciate, I know this is not something many people say, but I really enjoy Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation. I think it's a really interesting kind of meta pre-Cabin in the Woods movie. It's not perfect, but I think what it's accomplishing and trying to accomplish is pretty broad and incredible. And I really strongly dislike the movie Leatherface. It's a horrible Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie to me. But overall, the series has grown on me quite a bit. But my top handful is the remakes from Platinum Dunes and the original by Tobe Hooper. I find myself visiting those often. And actually, I think I visit the remakes a little bit more. The 2003 remake just it's perfect for me in what it does. I was kind of laughing. Aaron White, that hosts Feeling Film, was talking about A Quiet Place, and he was saying he was so shocked to see Michael Bay's name attached to it, since it was such a great movie, a great horror movie. And I kind of laughed to myself because Michael Bay's name was attached to Texas Chainsaw, and I think they're even better than A Quiet Place, but I think they're really masterful horror movies. And I think him giving these remakes to these young, hungry, up and coming filmmakers was a really wise decision. And I think that's why it kind of duplicates that, while not to the same extent, that Tobe Hooper success, in which, he's not afraid to try, crazy, wild things. He's not afraid to put the camera in unique and interesting places. And, it's just this brutal, unflinching movie that I don't think a director that's comfortable inside the studio system would be willing to do. But as for the movies themselves, starting with 2003's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I used to think it was better than the original, and I don't think that now, just because the original captures something that's never been able to be replicated. It's got a very unique quality where it doesn't feel scripted in any sense. I think the performances on some level and for some of the characters is better in the remake. with, the actors Jessica Biel, with, Eric Balfour is really good in it. Mike Vogel, Erica Learson's really good. They have these really solid performances. Obviously, Arlie Ermey as Sherrif Hoyt, but overall, I think the original has to get the credit for just what it was, how inventive and unique and interesting it was. Structurally, the remake is very well done, even though it in some ways follows kind of a formulaic slasher. It's still unique in many ways and hits some really interesting beats, and there's some really strong, shockingly emotional moments for a series like this. But anyway, watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think it holds up really well. I think as a standalone film, it's a great movie. There's a lot of stylistic things in it I love. It's actually interesting. The cinematographer on the movie was Danny Pearl, who DP'd the original Texas Chainsaw. So it has a lot of the same DNA of the original. But what he does with the camera really elevates this movie. There's a shot that's very famous early on where, and some minor spoilers are going to be brought up throughout the episode, so I hope you guys are okay with that. But there's a shot where this hitchhiker commits suicide in the back of our protagonist's van, and the camera in the next shot shows everyone in the van screaming, and then pulls back through the hole in her head, out the window, and down the hill around them, leaving this big wide shot. And just little shots like that are so interesting. And something Adam Green points out was inspiration for Hatchet, was watching these movies, was the idea of this unmotivated light. So, when a character is running through the woods or there's a farmhouse, there's always this glowing outline of light. There's no way it would naturally exist. But in the movie, it gives us this otherworldly quality. So from a performance level, from a cinematography level, from, the soundtrack, which is absolutely beautiful, the movie's really strong. Ultimately, I think, though, what really boosts this movie up to next level for me is Arlie Ermey. Arlie Ermey plays Sherrif Hoyt, who is the patriarchal figure of the Hewitt family. He basically replaces the character that Jim Siedow played in Texas Chainsaw and the sequel. He's just so frightening and funny and scary, yet super charismatic in a way that you just can't take your eyes off of him. Like, if you want to talk about quotable one-liners from a horror movie, there's one every time he opens his mouth. One scene that really stands out to me, and this speaks to the performance of both the actors playing the kind of protagonist roles and his performance, is there's a scene where he has the Jessica Biel and Erica Learson's character, and then he has Jonathan Tucker's character who plays Morgan in the movie. And so he has Morgan in the van, he has Aaron and Pepper, which is Jessica Biel and Erica Learson's characters, face down in the dirt outside the van, and he has Jonathan Tucker put his gun in his mouth. Basically, there's this long dialogue scene, and you can see Morgan getting more and more worked up. And actually, on one of the takes they did, which is the take that's in the movie, he becomes so emotionally into the character and worked up that he throws up a little bit. And it's so like visceral and gross and shocking when he does it. There's a moment where the sheriff looks away, and when he looks back, Morgan has the gun pointed on him. Anyway, it's just a very tense moment. It plays really, really well.
Is that where she was sitting? Because the angle don't add up for me with blood on that back window.
Maybe she was a bit more in the middle.
Well, maybe you ought to move a little more over to the middle.
But...
What, are you afraid of a little blood? Get the f*** over there! I don't have much of an imagination, so I need to get a distinct image of what went down here. What'd she do next?
She shot herself.
Oh, she shot herself. You don't say. How?
What do you mean, how?
Take the gun. Take the gun and show me how she did it. Come on. Take the gun. Take the gun and show me. Take the gun! Is that how she did it?
Yes. Yes, sir.
You're a liar. There ain't no hole in the bottom of her chin. I looked. She stuck the weapon into her mouth, didn't she? Show me how she did it.
Please.
Do it!
Please, 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 please don't.
Boy, there you go. And then what'd she do?
She shot herself.
You ain't lying to me again, are you?
No.
Because I have never seen a weapon go off without somebody's finger on the trigger.
Morgan, what's going on? You okay?
You girls stay in the dirt till I tell you different.
You get on the floor! I said get on the floor!
What the hell are you doing?
What are you gonna do? Shoot me?
Morgan, please, just please put the gun down, okay? Please don't kill me. Oh my God, Morgan.
You lying
You could kill me right now. Get out of here scot-free, couldn't you?
Morgan, please.
He shoots me! You're accomplice to murder!
Morgan, please.
You too?
Please, come on.
Just as guilty as him.
Morgan! Yeah! Shoot him! You put the gun down. Morgan, shoot him! Don't do it, please!
You don't have the balls, do you?
Don't shoot him, Morgan! Shoot him!
Trigger!
Dude!
Well. Looky here.
Oh my God,
We
Morgan.
got ourselves a killer. Only this time, you killed the sheriff.
No one chews scenery like Arlie Ermey. He, in Full Metal Jacket, he steals every scene he's in. In Texas Chainsaw, he steals every scene he's in. And then in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning, he really gets to be front and center, and we get to see the beginning and how all this started. And so ultimately we find out that he was just a guy in this dying town. There's only one law enforcement official, and he essentially murders this official and steals his identity. And so the sheriff we knew from, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake was actually just this normal, well, not normal, but this regular citizen who's kind of deranged that just took on the role and started killing and eating people to provide for his family in this place where the economy's dead and where there's no work and there's no ability to do anything, but he's going to stay put with his family and they're going to survive one way or another. Watching him slowly transition into this very dominant, very aggressive sheriff's character, someone he believes he truly is very strange and very unique. I love early on he puts on the uniform of the officer, he's cleaning the blood off the badge, and his wife comes over and is like,
"You really think you're something in that outfit, don't you? Here's your pants. Supper's on the table."
And he just looks in the mirror and says,
"I just love a man in uniform."
And it's just such a great line that, if someone else had said it, it probably wouldn't have came out the way it did from Arlie Ermey. And what I think he really understood about the character was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies are about family. They're about a family sticking together. It's a sick, twisted, demented family, but they're going to stick together to the end and do whatever it takes for their survival. No matter who that hurts, no matter who that harms, that's who it's going to be about, is about them. With how alpha he plays the character, I think it would have been interesting. Obviously, the way the 2003 film ends, there wouldn't have been a way for him to come back. But I think it would have been really interesting if we would have seen in a couple years after that, we'd seen a flash forward to, I guess, the 90s or even 2000s, and had R. Lee Ermey play the grandpa character that we know from the original, that's like very feeble but is legendary for his ability to kill. I think it would have been an interesting twist on it. I don't know how well it would have been received, but I think it would have been, thinking and kind of rewatching through a little bit of the movies last night, I was thinking it would be great if this was supposed to be grandpa in his prime, and sort of like when he's like this dominant alpha male character that's killing people and starting this whole tradition of bloodshed, and then seeing down the family line how how he's affected everyone. I think it would have been really interesting. Like I said, I just really wanted to take a second and just talk about R. Lee Ermey, his influence in the genre. I know, like I said, I was back watching these movies all the time, and it's because his character just felt so bigger than life, and so and just like his character in Full Metal Jacket, it's larger than life, and just a super talented performer, and someone that I'll always enjoy watching. I wrote in my Facebook post on the page, I'm sad we're never going to get to see another R. Lee Ermey performance, but I'm so thankful for the opportunity with, digital cinema and with DVD. We're able to revisit his performances and really get to appreciate time and time again his abilities as an actor. Just a fascinating man, fascinating actor, and from all accounts had a really big heart. And even though he played some of the most unlikable characters on screen, he seemed to be someone that was loved and admired by everyone he worked with, whether that's Matthew Modine or Stanley Kubrick or the cast and crew of the Texas Chainsaw movies. So anyway, just take some time this week. Be sure to check out the Texas Chainsaw movies from 2003 and 2006. If you haven't seen them. If you have seen them, it never hurts to watch them again. I know I am. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I'm trying to keep them all the same length. That was a comment I got. So I'm trying to keep these all around 30 minutes so the show kind of has a more uniform feel. Obviously, sometimes I might divert from the structure a little bit to do something like this where I just feel like I need to talk about a certain actor or director, but I'm going to try to keep the show about the same length each episode, and with the same kind of basic outline, with what I've been watching, bloody good movie, getting into the topic, and then on episodes where we're talking about multiple movies, doing an autopsy on a movie that doesn't work. That's kind of the basic outline there. I really appreciate everyone that's listened so far. I just want to take a second and say that both on Facebook and Instagram, on leaving iTunes reviews, people within the new Gut Reactions Facebook group. I really appreciate you guys chiming in with support. I do want to say this. If you have any, not necessarily requests, but, and I'm open to hear those too, but if you have any suggestions for how I can make the show more interesting or better for the audience, or can make tweaks here and there that will improve your experience listening to the show, please don't be afraid to let me know. I'd prefer you not necessarily do it in the form of a 1-star review. If you want to, hey, no stopping you. It's a free country. But I'd really appreciate if you'd either leave a comment on the link you click through to get to this, or join our private Facebook group. It's a very open forum. If you want to drop a suggestion in the group there, I'd be more than happy to listen to it. I can't promise I'll add everything everyone says. But if you say, hey, I'd prefer a segment about this, or you spend too much time on this, or anything like that, I'd love to hear it. I know I've reached out to some friends and asked them specifically what they think, and have gotten some great honest feedback that hopefully has been taken and reflected in the show to the right extent. So anyway, so thank you guys for listening. Like I said before, go ahead and take a minute to leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That really helps my ranking and helps people get to know about the show. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Join our private Facebook group and join the discussion there. And really get involved in the community I'm trying to put together. I just want us to all be horror fans that can celebrate and enjoy the genre together. So thank you guys so much for listening. That's all for this week. I'll catch you in episode number 009.